today about using Power Automate in Dynamics 5/CDS. And before we get started, I want to thanks Raz for organizing those Saturdays, so those events. Then I see also in the chat so that we have members, attendees from worldwide, like India, UK, Europe, worldwide. So that's nice to see that we have a community who's joining on Saturdays those events. Before we get started, some rules. So please remember to mute your microphones. And if you have questions, just ask them via chat. So this is not a lecture. So ask your questions via chat if you have them. Let me first introduce myself. I am Abdullah Demir. I'm working as a Power Platform consultant at Ilionix. From original, I am a CRM consultant. But we are moving to Power Platform with CDS. So from now, I am a Power Platform consultant. I'm working in the Netherlands, a Dutch company. And please tweet, share, like. We have a hashtag and we have a Twitter. Please tweet and share and like. Today's agenda. So we had the introduction. From then we will go to the Power Platform. And then I have a quick slide about Power Automate versus classic workflow. I think the most of all knows the classic workflows in CDS. And then we will have a deep dive in the CDS connectors in Power Automate. And we have some demos today. We have three demos. And then we have some tips and tricks. And at the end, we have some Q&A. But if you have questions during the session, just ask them via chat. So I'm following also the chat. Before we get started, I want to know who's here today. So please text in the chat if you're a functional consultant or a developer or an administrator or a decision maker or a power user. Leave it in the chat so then we are knowing that. And then I want to also know who's already working with Power Automate in CDS. So let me also know in the chat. I see a lot of, I see 3 developers. Okay, the Microsoft Power Platform. So in the Power Platform, we have 4 components. The first one is Power BI to get insights from your data. The next one is Power Apps, so where you can interact with your data like a front end. And then we have the Power Automate, so this is the workflow engine from the platform. And then in the Power Platform, so we have Office 365, Azure, and Dynamics 365. And we have more than 300 connectors, and we have the command data service. But if you are working with Dynamics 365, then you're already using the CDS, the command data service. It's fully in the cloud, and it's a no-code local platform where you can easily, quickly create your apps or your workflows. And then we have one more, that's the Power Virtual Agents. So that's recently added to the Power Platform where you can quickly create your own bots. I see also some functional constants. Okay. Who's already familiar with the Dynamics Classic workflows? Please let me know it in the chat. So I did a comparison about the Power Automate versus the Dynamics Classic workflows. So we have on the left side, we have Power Automate, and we have on the right side, the classic workflows. So I compared both workflows with each other. So the first one is, so in both workflows, you can have a conditional branching. And then this one is important for me. So in Power Automate, you can loop in records. So where you cannot do that in the classic workflows. And then, so wait condition on fields. So this is still not possible in Power Automate, but I will say it's coming soon. But this is also possible in dynamic workflows, in the classic workflows. And then we have a branch, so in Power Automate, which you don't have that in the classic workflows. So, and one thing one thing what we are missing in Power Automate is the real-time workflows. So this is something what we not have in Power Automate, but this one do we have in the dynamic set classic workflows. So in both workflows, you can have dynamic content. And in Flow, you cannot still have the pre-image of event data, where this is possible in the Dynamics workflows. And in both workflows, you can run some child workflows and also run CDS actions in both workflows. And approvals is something nice to use in some use cases, which we have built in Power Automate, but don't have in Dynamics workflows. And then this one is a nice one, the transaction support. So in Power Automate, you can also create some flows where you can support transactions. For example, let's say you have a change set where you want to make 3 updates in a transactional data. If one of the 3 is gonna fail, then it will fail. Then it will stop the update. So you will get an error message. And this is still not possible in dynamic workflow. And in both of the workflows, you can trigger on field change. You can trigger on multiple entity events, so like create, update, delete. You can run them both on demand. You can run them in scope, so for organization, for business unit or user. And this one is also a nice one, so run on schedule. So you can schedule a workflow where you can, let's say, run daily Power Automate, where you can run some workflows. But this one, you cannot do that in the classic workflows. And then now we have auditing. So in both workflows, you have the auditing. And in Power Automate, so we have the run analytics. So, and in the classic work, we don't have that. So as you know, also, we have a modern design experience in Power Automate, where we don't have that in the Dynamics workflows. And we can also use some AI analytic authoring assistance in Power Automate. So you can build your own AI models in the AI builder of the Power Platform, and then you can use it in your flows. And both of the engines have some solution support. Are there any questions on this comparison? Oh, I see one question from about pre-image of event data. Let's say I have an account where I'm gonna update an address field. So the pre-image is the previous value. So we are updating an address field. So we have a new value and an old value. So with dynamic workflow, you can execute the workflow before the update. Is that clear for you? So with the pre-image of event data? Yes, it's clear. And then next, so we have CDS connectors, but we have 2 CDS connectors in Power Automate. The first takeaway, what I want to give you away is build all your flows in solutions and never use a Dynamics 365 connector, because this one is deprecated. And then we have 2 connectors. We have one, the Common Data Service, and we have Common Data Service current environment. So I will show it later in the demo. But my advice to you is use this connector only if you need to use the trigger when a record is selected, so on demand. And then a Power Automate has a trigger and actions. So, and a Power Automate starts always with a trigger. So a trigger could be when a record's updated or created. And we have actions, so where you can do some actions on your data, like updates and so on. And in Flow, in Power Automate, if you were looking for CDS connector, then you will note that you will see premium. And premium indicates that this is some premium connector where you need to have a license. And then, so here we are seeing here one connector, and we will see here the other connector. So let me show you the connectors now in the demo. So now I am in Flow. If you're in Flow, be sure that you're always in the right environment. So double check always your environment. So if I now create a new flow, let's say automated, let's say test, and then CDS. So now you will note that we only see the connector, so the one connector, because we are not seeing the another connector, this current environment connector. If you want to see the current environment connector, then you need to create the flow via a solution. So let me do that. 365 Saturday, flow. So if I now enter in common data service, then I will see two connectors. So one is the common data service, and the other is the common data service current environment. Any questions on this? If we go to the next slide, again, we have the two connectors. So, and the difference between the connectors is that in the common data service connector, you need to define the environment. But in the other connector, you don't need to define your environment, because it's already built in the environment where you created it. And then the difference is, so here you have multiple triggers like create or update or delete, or you can even trigger on create, where you don't have that in the common data service connector. And then, of course, you have entity name and your scope. And then in this one, you have also some filtering attributes. Like, for example, you want to only trigger your flow on update of one specific field. And then we have also some filter expressions where you can filter your trigger when do need to execute the Power Automate. And then you can also postpone the Power Automate, the execution. So for example, with 1 day or with 2 minutes. And then this one is new, run as. So you have the process owner, so run as process owner, record owner, or triggering user. So, and this one is the current environment connector, and this one is the common data service connector. But my advice is use always the current environment connector. Any questions on this? No. Let's go continue. Now, if we have a look in the actions, those are the actions from the current environment connector. So we have create a new record where you can create a new record in CDS. We can delete a record in CDS. We can get a record, a specific record. And we have one for list records where you can get a list records. And this one is a nice one, so where you can call some actions like opportunity close or unbound actions. And we can also relate and unrelate records. So if you have many-to-many relationships in CDS, then you need to use those actions. So if you want to associate that user to a record, for example. And of course, we can update records in CDS. And we have here the change set. And we have predict. This predict is for the AI builder. And we can also upload file or image content. I see two questions. Does triggering user require Power Automate access? So you don't need to, if you are using the current environment connector, then you don't need to share the Power Automate with the user, so with all of the users. And then we have postpone. We have a question about postpone until. It's not the same as it's the same as a wait comment. So let's say we have a trigger on create, and then we can say postpone until tomorrow. So then your flow will be started, and then tomorrow it will continue with executing the actions, for example. And we have a question about deployment. So I have later on a demo about the deployments. Any questions furthermore on this? No, let's go continue. I often get the question, when do I use wet? So because in Flow we have a lot of CDS actions. So and I'm getting often the question, when do I use wet? So we have, for example, we have a case where we can execute the flow on demand. And in on demand, you can think about when a record is selected in CDS. So for example, I am selecting account, and then I want to run a Power Automate. And then we have the automated one. So, and this will trigger on create or update or delete. And you can also schedule some jobs, for example, daily notifications to sales. So for example, run every night and then get the opportunities and send a notification to sales, for example. Relate unrelated records. So this one you need to use with many-to-many associations and disassociations. And with predict, you can extract the output of the AI model, which you have built. And then we have the action, perform a bound action. And with this one, you can execute an action via Power Automate in CDS. So for example, close opportunity. And then we have the change set request. And this one you can use for transactional data. For example, if you have an update on 3 transactions, but you want to be sure that all of the 3 steps are succeeded, then you need to use the change set request. Any questions on this? No, we don't have questions on this. Let's go further. So now let's get started with the on-demand trigger in CDS. Let me first explain you the case before we go to the demo. So I have here a project, and I want to copy this project quarterly when I select some specific records. So if I open a project, then we have here some fields, and a project can have a team. So, and the thing is, what I want to achieve is, if I copy this project, then I want to copy all of the data in this specific record. So let's create now a new flow. As I already mentioned, always create your flows via solutions. So now let's say new, and then create a new flow. So we are using this CDS connector, command date service, and now we want to use the command date service connector because the current environment connector does not have the trigger for when a record is selected. So now we are using this trigger. Yeah, you need to define your environment. So it's by default, you need to say default. And then you need to define your entity name. In my case, it's projects. And what my advice also to you to rename your action. So let's say when a project is selected. And then you can also add some input, extra input to your flow. Let's say I want to have an extra date field. So start date, for example. Okay, or let's use trigger date. And now, so my trigger is ready. From here, you can rename your flow. Let's say demo on demand, for example. Now we will add a new step. Let's say command date service. Now I'm using the current environment connector. And now I want to list my records. So I want to list those users, so my team. And this is a many-to-many association in CDS. So we are gonna say when a record is selected. No, sorry, we're gonna list the records. Oh no, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. So with this step, I want to list my records in my from the many-to-many association. So I'm gonna go to my solution, and then I'm gonna go to my entity. I need to know the entity name of the many-to-many association. It's loading. And so we have relationships, and then here, as you can see, I have here a new one, many-to-many. So let me copy this one. So if you want to copy the records, then you need to do a custom value. So set, so this is my entity name, custom value, new. And if you're using many-to-many, always paste at the end set. So otherwise you cannot retrieve the data. And then I want to filter my many-to-many association. Let's say new project ID calls my project. So the one from my trigger. And then you can also use here some fetch XML queries, expand query, or select queries. So in this case, I'm using the filter query. So okay, now I am listing the records, and then the next step is to create a new project, common read service. Again, create a new record. As I already mentioned, no, I am using the wrong connector. I need to use the current environment connector. Come and see that CDS, this one, create a new record. Let's say projects. We can give the name. Let's grab the name via the action. Okay, now we can do the mapping. So we are running out of time. So I already created this flow. Let me show you the flow, which one I have already created. So demo copy project, this one. Okay, so as I already mentioned, so I have the trigger when the record is selected. And then I am listing the record.
Hi, Abdullah, if you could unmute yourself, sorry. Thank you, thanks.
Can you?
Hi, Abdullah. Yes, you're still muted, unfortunately. I believe someone joined, a guest joined the call, and that was unmuted, so they interrupted the actual stream. So once again, everybody, if you are joining the call, please mute your mic, have courtesy for the presenter. Abdullah, you're still muted. Could you please unmute? There you go.
Yes,
Yeah,
can you hear
you're
me
back.
now?
You're back. So to avoid any further interruptions, please have some courtesy, and I won't be allowing any more people to join this call to avoid any further interruptions until the session has ended. So thanks everyone. I apologize, and please, Abdullah, please continue. Thanks.
Thanks, Raz. Thanks. Let's go continue. So now I want to copy this project. So I have here a button. This is my on-demand trigger. I'm saying copy project. And then you can give some input. Just for example, the input one is the new project name. Let's say new test. You can also use some option sets as trigger. And let's give it a date for the new start date of the project. And then now let's say run flow. So now what you will see is we will now see a new project. So this one. If I open now the new project, as you can see, I can see the new name which I have given in the new parameter. We have the template, we have the account, we have the owner, we have the amount, and we have the start date. So the start date is the one which I have entered in the trigger. And then we have the original project. And the important thing is I can see now my team members again. So, and with this, you can copy some records in bulk. So this is the on-demand trigger. Any questions on this? So if we have a lesson clears on demand trigger, so by the way, there's a limitation on the trigger. So if you are selecting 250 records, so it will not work. So the limit is around 130 records, and include always flows always in a solution. You can use variables in your trigger. And for lookup fields, if you want to map lookup fields, use the plural entity plural name and the record ID. So always in this logic. And if you want to retrieve the many-to-many entity name, then you need to get the many-to-many entity name, and then at the end, paste set to get the records. And then for relate records action, you need to parse the environment URL. And via this query, you can parse the environment URL. But you can use this query, but you need to change the list records. So, and you need to change this to your action. So in this case, so here, you need to give the action name. So here, I am here parsing the environment URL. So I'm here getting about a question about the dynamic graph connector. Now the dynamic graph connector in Power Automate is deprecated, so you need to use always a CDS connector. Let's go continue for our next demo. Now if you create some flows, we want to also deploy those solutions to another environment. So in this case, I'm gonna deploy my solutions from dev to production. I'm getting a question about environment URL. You need to use the environment URL because that's needed by the relate action. So because CDS is asking for the URL like this. So if we are using the relate records function, then you need to use the URL. Okay, now I have a solution in my, let's say, dev environment. In my solution, I have my flows. Now I'm gonna export my solution. You can also run the solution checker if you want, but I'm gonna export it managed. Now, it can take some time. It's still loading. Yes, now I have my solution. So, and now I want to import this in another environment. So just click on import, select your solution, and then import it. So with this step, you're deploying your solutions, your flow, sorry. And if you're using the current environment connector, then you don't need to do anything on the connectors. So your flows will directly work in the destination environment. So this one is importing. Let's continue. We're running out of time. If we have a look in the lessons learned in the deploying solutions, so my advice to you is use a separate solutions for your flows. Include flows always in a solution and import managed to your test, acceptance, or production environment. So my solution is still importing, so it can take some time. Any questions on deploying solutions with flows? Nice. I'm getting a question about different variables. Why in a different solution? So because of flows is something which you want to import once in your destination environment, and then from there you don't want to continue your customizations in CDS. So my advice to you is separate those solutions. And I'm getting a question about different variables. What you can do is, will solution packager work with flow solutions? Yes, it will work. And you can also create some variables, because now in CDS we have also some environment variables. That's this one, if you are in your solution. This one. You can also here create now environment variables. So, and this one will be specific for that environment. So have a look in this. Okay, let's go continue. Okay, the next demo is about updating child records with Power Automate in CDS. So this is a scenario where I want to update my address on my contacts. So let's say I have an account, and on my account I have some address fields, but I want to keep those addresses in sync to my contacts. Let me show you. So this is the example. So I have account, and I have here some address fields. So, but what I want to achieve is I want to update those address fields to my related contacts on update. So here I have here some contacts. So let's say we will make this Power Automate Saturday, for example. This address will be synced to the related contacts. So here you can see that it's Power Automate. Let me show you the solution, the flow. That's demo 2. So I have a trigger. I have a trigger when an account is created or updated. I'm using some filtering attribute. So because I want to trigger this flow only if there's any updates on those specific fields. So, and if you want to know the fields names, I'm using always level up. So where you can see the logical names. So and you can paste those values in your Power Automate. Let's continue. So this is my trigger. And then I'm getting my related contacts for the account. And if you want to use lookup fields, so let's go to my contact. So I have here the parent customer ID field. So this is the logical name of the field. But if you want to use this in Flow, you need to start with underscore, the name of the field, underscore value, and then equals, and then your account ID. Otherwise, you cannot get the records. And then what I'm doing is I'm applying the updates on my contact. So the address from the city from the account, the street also from the account. So, and then from here you can do your mapping. Any questions on this? So, and this is something which you can build in 10 minutes. So. So no questions. If we have a look in the lessons learned for updating child records, so you can use filtering attributes. Rename always your actions and triggers. And then where possible, use the CDS current environment connector. And then if you want to filter your related records, use filter query. So as I already mentioned, so underscore field name, underscore value, and then equals record ID. Or you can use a fetch XML query. It's up to you. I see some questions here on the chat. So I'm getting a question about importing solutions to another environment. So yes, let's say you have deployed your solution to your destination environment. So if you make some updates on your flow again in your dev environment, you can deploy the solution again. So no problem on that. The next question is, can I add my flow in a solution after creating it? Yes, of course. If you go to the solution, you have the option to add solutions outside your solution. So, and then you open your solution and then say add existing flow. And then you have two options, from solutions or outside solutions. Your flows will count towards API limits, yes. So for each action, it will count towards your API limits in CDS. So I'm here and getting about a question about many-to-many relationship. So the one which I have shown you is supported only in CDS. So I don't know in which scenario you want to use this. And if other questions? So you can also use the system relationship and custom. So the relate record you can use on system relationship or custom relationships. So you can also use, you can also associate members to a marketing list, for example. So what we have one more question. What is the max record can be retrieved using list records? So there's no limit. So you can retrieve all of the records. I'm getting a lot of more questions. Can we use Power Automate to trigger custom actions? Which trigger? Yes, you can call in Power Automate custom actions. You can do that. Oh, I'm getting a question about when using the CDS current environment connector. How do you get the actual name of an owner? So I can show you that, how you can do that. So for example, in this flow, if I go to my execution history, so now we will don't see the owner name. We will only see the GUID, the record ID. So let's say owner. So I'm missing the name. So if you want to get the name, you need to do add an action, common data service, say get a record, entity name is user, and then the owner ID. So just enter your owner, and now you have your owner name. Let's continue, and at the end we can. I will answer your questions. So I have also some tips and tricks for you. So in Flow, there's a copy functionality in Power Automate, which is in preview. So this one. So what you can achieve with this is, so I can say copy this to my clipboard. And I can now add this to another flow. My clipboard here. You can paste it here. So this is a nice one. It's still in preview. And then the next one, create your flows always via solutions to use the CDS current environment connector. Yeah, there are workarounds for this to see this connector in another scenario. So, and then my advice is avoid unnecessary API calls. Use fetch.xml to get related records, or use expand query. Use CDS connector if you need to run flows manually on a selected record, for example. And in if we are working in fetch.xml builder in XRM Toolbox, there's a tool where you can get your filter queries in fetch.xml builder. Let me show you that. So I have here fetch.xml builder. I can here build some conditions, and then from here I can say view and then see your Power Automate parameters. Here, this one, and you can copy this to your flow. And then we have some templates because Microsoft has some templates which you can use. And one thing good to know is there's a 28 days runs history. So because we have here our history, and the history will be saved for 28 days. And don't forget that you're not alone. So we have a community where you can ask all of your questions, and you will also get your answers of the questions. Don't forget this. And yeah, this is the end of my presentations. Any questions? I see some questions in the chat. Yeah, with Flow, you can also do some bulk operations for bulk updates, so you can do that. Can we use Power Automate to trigger web jobs on Azure? Sure, because we have more than 300 connectors, so this is possible. I have here a question about applying paging in Power Automate if we have more than 5,000 records. Yeah, sorry, I don't know this answer for you. I'm getting a question about the history duration. No, we cannot change the history duration, so it's by default 28 days. The next question is, do we have a retry mechanism in Power Automate in case flow fails? Yes, there's a retry mechanism, so I will show you that as well. Here we have a flow. If you go to your settings, so there's here some retry policies. So from here you can define your retry policies. I'm getting a question about logic apps or Power Automate. So my advice to you is, if you are using this in CDS context, then use Power Automate. And if you are building some complex integrations, then use logic apps. I'm getting here a question while importing flows to different environment. Do we need to configure the connections again? So no. If you are using the current environment connector, then you don't need to update the connectors. I see a question about what's the best way to troubleshoot for failed flows. So my advice to you is, by default, test your flow if it is working. I don't have any best practice for how you can work with failed flows. I see. Whoa, I'm getting a lot of questions. How we can display the progress Power Automate in an empty form or a web resource JavaScript? No, because the flows are running background, so you cannot get that with a web resource or a plugin. Any questions further? I'm getting a question how to configure date fields. Like, let's say we have an event on specific date, we need to send a confirmation email before X days. What you can do is you can create your flow, you can create a daily flow, which is running in the night, for example, and then you can get the records for that specific event. So then you need to build some filtering, like let's say, list the records where the start date of the event is X 5 days, for example. Any more questions?
Hello, Abdullah.
Yes, hi.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I mute because I don't have the chat for my side. I was wondering how to do a loop on the users. The use case is the following. I want to send an activity report each week to each user based on his activity on CDS, of course. How can we do that?
So can you explain it again? You say your case again?
The case is I need to send weekly basis report to each CDS user on his activity.
Okay, so what you can do is create a new flow, run it on schedule. So just schedule it. For example, let's say daily, or schedule it. So you have the trigger here, this one, and then say daily or weekly. It's up to you. And then new step, C common data service. List the records, the activities, which one you need, and then you can send the emails via Outlook connector or in CDS. Does I answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. And how to do the loop on all the users, because you want to send each an email for each user.
Okay, then I have a good one for you. So because if you get the activities, a task, for example, because I don't have now any tasks. So if you get those lists, then you will see only the owner ID, so not the name. So, but you can use expand query to get also the owner ID name. I will send you a link for the expand query, how you can use this.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Records, and I see one more question. Records created from flow will be assigned to which user by default? So by default is the one who's running the flow, but if you map the owner, then it's mapped to the owner. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you, Abdullah. There's lots of questions. I think you've been obviously trying to address to your best ability, address everyone's questions. And I'm sure many of you have many more questions. Flow is probably the most evolving and is the element that probably has the most impact to all your projects. So it is something which has a very there is a learning curve there, and there are many scenarios to apply Power Automate to. So the good news is that we have a whole day dedicated to Flow next week. On next Saturday is Power Automate, it's Automation Saturday. So if there are any unanswered questions related to Power Automate, then make sure you get them. Make sure you attend next week. I also would like to know if there's any outstanding questions that you feel have not been answered. Please feel free, because there's so many questions that have been logged in the chat. It'd be great for you just to mention any questions again, because obviously we've actually run out of time for this session. So if you could please, if there's a question that you still have that you feel may not be answered, please submit it in the chat window so that we can ensure that it gets addressed. If not today, next week. I'm sure you have many. We want to know the scenarios you're trying to use Flow. We're trying to understand the problems you're trying to solve with Flow. So we definitely want to hear your questions. So thank you for asking those questions. That we've probably had the most questions.
Raz, you're muted.
Somebody muted, sorry?
Yeah. Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So yes, so please carry on sending your questions through to the chat. Sorry guys, yeah, for some reason I got muted there. I'm not sure what happened. What I'm asking is for everyone to remember that there is a whole Power Automate Saturday is next Saturday. So it's a whole day dedicated just to Power Automate and Flow. So please attend that, and make sure you submit your questions. If there's questions that you have that maybe are unanswered, please submit them in the chat window, so that we can ensure you get the answer. If not today, then definitely next week.
Or you can send me a message via Twitter so I can help you.
Yes, Abdullah is available on Twitter. I've shared his Twitter account already on the chat. I'm going to share it again. There you go. So I've shared Abdullah's Twitter account. Feel free to connect with him on Twitter, LinkedIn, but yes, there's a question of the question: can you clone copy records via Power Automate in CDS? For example, copying a quote, its related quote line items. Technically, you should be able to. You should be able to clone one value to the other value, because you're passing through. You're creating a JSON record and you're a JSON object, and you're passing it into another record. So technically you can. Have you ever done it? Abdullah, have you ever managed to clone a record using Flow?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
For example, I can clone my opportunities with the product line, so it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something that people are doing. Can we control the Power Automate connectors via some governance policy? Bill, look, that's definitely something that's been there's been a big announcement actually this week related to the DLP update, so that you can now apply more stringent rules to the connectors and protect your CDS from events. So in short, 100% yes, now you can through the DLP for the Power Platform, Bill. And Gary's got a question. If possible, can you please comment on updating a flow and the active layer when you import into an environment via solution? So Gary, I'm guessing you're referring to the solution layering and the way managed solutions work. So technically, the solutions managed solutions would apply changes onto the layer and apply the changes in Flow. However, I don't know if the nuances related to that. I know there are many nuances related to the ever updates of Flow. I mean, Abdullah, can you share any nuances when trying to apply managed updates to in-flight Power Automate flows?
It will, if we have a managed flow in a different environment, you cannot edit that flow. You will get an error.
So if you try to apply an update, so you try to install a managed solution update, and it's in flight, so that flow is in flight, and then you try and apply a managed update to it. So is there like a strategy towards applying updates to flows? So imagine you've added a new step. I'm guessing that's a question you're trying to ask, Gary. You're making a managed update to a existing flow that's in flow. That's right.
Okay. If you import the solution again, it will also get the the new step in your target environment. Yes.
Now, Gary, that actually brings us on to another interesting question, but we've run out of time. So it is time for the next session now. So I have to end this session here. So again, thank you, Abdullah, it's a very good session. It's a session we've had the most questions for. So obviously there's a lot of interest and useful scenarios for Power Automate. So thanks again for the session. And now we will be moving on to the next session now.
So Raj, is that an idea that we maybe for next week a Q&A panel for
100%? We need a QA panel for next week. So I will arrange with Daniel for next week that at the end of the event to have a Q&A panel. Yeah.
Okay, because
and it'll be great for you to join us. But let's get that agreed with Daniel, and let's do that, because I think there is a good use case for a Q&A panel. So again, thank you again, Abdullah, for that. And now it's on to our next session. So Arpit, are you ready?